Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are the Guardian sports writer Jonathan Liew and the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run everyone through the back pages, starting with the back of the Guardian, which says England in charge, the Stokes shines. Vman not for sale at any price, says FA's Bullingham. Anfield alert, Isak opens door to swapping Newcastle for Liverpool. Telegraph says that Isak wants to quit Newcastle, and that's the spirit. Duckett and Crawley put England in control. Express, Isak eyes exit, Liverpool on alert as striker tells Newcastle he wants to explore move. Phenomenal Ben joins the great. And the back of the Sun. My time here is done. Isak eyes move as Cop Wade in wings. Nonny shocker and loops like the end. Right, let's start with the front of the Telegraph sports section then. Isak wants to quit Newcastle. I mean, Jonathan, this is a huge story. A week or so ago, he was not for sale. It looked like he was going nowhere. Week's a long time in football, though. And, yeah, Liverpool, the main suitor. He's exploring options. Where do you think this one's going to end up?
Well, I mean, this is like a game of 4D chess, isn't it? Where, I mean, every piece seems to have some knock-on effect further down the chain. Yeah, I mean, I think it is no secret that Isak is one of the kind of the sought-after strikers this summer. I think what's become clarified a little bit today is the extent to which he is open to a move away. The question is where exactly that move is. You know, whether this if this information had come out 2 or 3 weeks ago, whether he might have a few more options on the table. Liverpool, I think, you know, they were interested before. They may well still be interested despite signing Ekitike, although they would have to, I think they would have to shift on, certainly Darwin Núñez, possibly Luis Diaz as well before they could make a move. Arsenal seem to be pretty deep into that, the Gyökeres deal. You know, can't really see PSG making a move. United and Chelsea have basically been briefing that they're not that interested. So it's an interesting one because Isak is a player who has almost catapulted himself into the elite faster than Newcastle can grow to meet that demand. He's obviously not amongst the highest earners in the Premier League. He now does have Champions League football, but he obviously feels like he has earned a move to one of the giants of Europe. The question is, you know, where he's going to get that move in an era of, I guess, tightening budgets. So if I had to bet, I don't really bet except on darts sometimes. But I would say that Isak would probably still be a Newcastle player on the first day of the season, possibly with an improved deal.
OK, interesting. Well, let's go to the inside of the Telegraph, Miguel, because interesting piece from Luke Edwards. Newcastle want to be the predators and not the prey. I mean, they won the Carabao Cup, first time in 70 years. They're in the Champions League. They've got Anthony Elanga over the line. They don't want to be losing, arguably, their best player. They want to be building for bigger and better things, don't they?
Well, they may want, but actions have been a little different lately. And that's despite, obviously, what was a historic landmark of winning the Carabao Cup in March. I mean, like, the immediate discussion that usually comes up here is that PSO rules have stopped PIF, the controversial Newcastle owners, spending what they would like on players, which has contributed to maybe Isak not being paid as well as he should, or even that a competitive team to the level of maybe potentially challenging for the Champions League or League hasn't put around them. But this is also a situation where we haven't yet seen, I mean, Newcastle, we've been waiting for news in the stadium. We've been news in the training ground. Also, one of the big headlines that was used to justify a controversial takeover back when it happened was we're going to see investment in the area. There hasn't been too many big headlines about that either. And at the same time as all this, and this is where I think it's really intriguing, I suppose, as regards Isak's future, Newcastle seem a little bit directionless at the moment in terms of football strategy. Paul Mitchell has left. They found it really difficult to do a deal. They've missed out on 5 big targets this summer. Eddie Howe seems to be very much the central figure in the club, beyond the power that a manager would usually have at a modern football club. And in that situation, I mean, there are issues here that feel bigger than PSR. And in that situation, as Isak's looking around, he's seen many players on the come, and even the latest one, Ekitike, who's supposed to, notionally play alongside him rather than replace him, has gone to Liverpool. And it looks like Isak wants to go as well. Now, the one thing about this, and I think Johnny's point there about this maybe coming out 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the public chronology of this and the chronology behind the scenes. So Craig Hope, brilliant story today where he revealed the situation that Isak wants to explore options. This, and it made public, I suppose, what had been bubbling for a while, but what none of us could write. We'd all been hearing stuff about Isak. No one could actually kind of go and write it. That, yeah, he wanted out. And that, I mean, I wrote today after Craig's report today that Eddie Howe has been worried about the situation for weeks. And obviously that kind of timeline would sync up with the fact, or previous reports, that Liverpool wanted him. Now, Liverpool denied putting in a bid or making contact to Newcastle, but it was made pretty clear they were interested in Isak. That didn't happen, and obviously they moved for Newcastle's main target, Ekitike. So I just wonder about the kind of public chronology now against what happens next behind the scenes, and whether actually Liverpool are indeed comfortable with their options, which had been some of the kind of some of the talk today from people close to the club, or this is all part of this wider game. And eventually, with Newcastle's maybe leverage decreasing because they potentially have a player that doesn't want to stay, that they kind of back Newcastle into a corner a little bit. Because I mean, usually in these situations, even though it's there's a lot of noise coming out of the club today that PIF and Yasser Al Rumayyan absolutely don't want to sell. They want to draw a hard line. But the reality is sometimes those situations don't necessarily serve a club because you're stuck with a player who has had his head turned. My gut on this, actually, I suppose, is Liverpool eventually do business for Diaz, although I don't think they've named their price yet to Bayern Munich. Potentially sell Darwin Núñez, and there's all sorts of kind of circular stuff there, given Darwin Núñez could potentially go to a PIF-owned club in Saudi Arabia, which could potentially embolden Liverpool's bid for Isak. But yeah, maybe if those two deals get done, because Liverpool actually have PSR headroom right now, they could do Isak, but I don't think they want a kind of a bloated squad or a bloated wage bill. But I think if that happens, then we may see a very interesting last few days of the window.
We certainly might. Jonathan, Miguel there mentioned Liverpool and the kind of merry-go-round, and they might have to offload the likes of Diaz to bring in an Isak. But if we look at the back of the Express, Isak eyes exit, Liverpool on alert. A striker tells Newcastle he wants to explore the move. Let's just focus on Liverpool because they've made some terrific signings already. Ekitike, as Miguel mentioned, who was potentially being lined up by Newcastle, has gone to Liverpool. If they've got PSR headroom, was Miguel's phrase, if they start to put the likes of Isak in there as well, that's pretty daunting for the rest, isn't it?
It is, I think, in terms of, the whole winning the transfer window meme, which I think we get to at the end of every summer, and doesn't always tally to, how things often turn out during the season. I think with Liverpool, they've strengthened at fullback, they brought in Ekitike, they brought in Wirtz. I think we're at the point, we're beyond a point now where you are, strengthening or building from a position of strength to the point where if as well as of course the tragic events that occurred this summer as well, whether we're at the point where the sheer turbulence and the pace of change at Liverpool means that there's a real kind of knock-on effect on their cohesion and their strategy and how it all fits together ahead of the start of the season. We're now reaching that point. I think obviously Liverpool needed to upgrade. I think there was no question about that. But Ekitike and Isak coming in, if that does happen in the same summer, with potentially Diaz going, with potentially Núñez going, I think that's a huge amount of upheaval for even as stable a club as Liverpool to weather without any kind of qualms or storms. And I think just because Liverpool can do this deal now, because of the PSR headroom, I don't know if it's necessarily the smartest thing for them to do it right now.
Yeah, just picking up on that point that Jonathan just made, Miguel, that one of the features of Arne Slot's first year in charge was that stability. He didn't do too much in the transfer business. I think it was only Chiesa as the kind of high-profile signing that came in. Certainly wasn't in the league of maybe getting an Isak over the line. This year there's been a lot more movement. Is there a danger that could potentially destable Liverpool as they look to kind of try and gel all these players all of a sudden?
I don't necessarily think so, because the word last summer was actually that Arne Slot wanted to overhaul his front line there and basically change everything around Salah. And obviously Salah, I mean, the other factor in this is that if he does go in a year, maybe 2 years, Isak looks the kind of most obvious successor. But yeah, he wanted to change the front line last year. He didn't, I think, for a few reasons. Not least, kind of, there was already enough change to the club with Klopp going. There weren't necessarily the right options available in the market. And they only brought in Chiesa in the end. They didn't spend in January either. So this is essentially 3 windows in one, and where he is finally changing that front line in the way he wanted last year. I mean, it was one of the strange things, actually, that did come up when Newcastle actually beat Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final, that even though Liverpool had been brilliant for most of the season, you would have thought they looked so strong. That was weirdly married with a kind of simultaneous discussion where you could have easily said, well, Liverpool actually still do need 5 players, because maybe there's a slight staleness and kind of in some areas of the squad and some of the players that Arne Slot used all the time. So I mean, the one thing is about bringing in that many players at once. Yes, it does sometimes require time, but then I suppose look what Slot did last season. Coming in and immediately having that impact. I think one of the bigger themes is actually last season, bar Liverpool winning the title, it was almost characterised by the success of the Premier League's middle classes, where a lot of the Premier League's best performing players were at clubs outside the traditional elite, whereas this summer feels like a bit of a reversion back the other way.
OK, good points. Let's move off Isak just for a second and go back to, go to another striker. And this one in that inside spread in the Telegraph. Villa warn United, Jonathan, forget about moving for Watkins. Ollie Watkins, valued at about £60 million by Villa. United obviously still trying to find some potency up front, and they've inquired about Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, I've been turning this one over in my head for the last few hours, to be honest. I think the fee, I mean, what do they talk about, 60, 70 million for a 29-year-old? It's a lot. That's your United tax in action there. I still don't, I still don't think United, they obviously want a player of proven, Premier League class. Watkins brings that. He's, his injury record is very good. His fitness record, is very good. He could certainly plug in and play. The big unknown in all this is, like, why would Watkins want to go to Manchester United? I mean, this is a guy who's played in the Champions League this season. He's got European football again next season, and obviously United have the name, but it also brings that pressure. It also brings that scrutiny, and it also brings a track record of players not really developing and improving there. So I don't know. We haven't really heard much about Ollie Watkins' motivations, but there does seem to be an assumption that, well, if United want him, then he'll definitely go. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, the European football argument, Miguel, is an important one, I guess. But the counter argument might be that you could be part of a United rebuild and part of a kind of legacy in years to come. They've got Mbeumo, they've got Cunha, two, again, established, proven players. If you can add Watkins into that mix as well and suddenly be part of the turnaround at Manchester United, is that not a compelling story?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to kind of, regurgitate a lot of memes and all this sort of thing, but it is Manchester United. The name still does stand. I mean, we've seen them all beat other clubs in transfer targets this season. There is another side, of course, that Watkins' position at Villa may change, especially as they maybe. I don't think the pressure on them to sell is as great as expected before the window, but maybe just to keep things stable and absolutely ensure there's no pressure as regards a player like Morgan Rogers, it maybe makes sense to move on someone that bit older like Watkins. The more interesting thing for the Manchester United side, I suppose, it just feels like such a extreme. Even though this new era was supposed to be a clean slate, it feels just like an obvious kind of swing back from, say, Højlund. I mean, Højlund was the sort of striker they bought because of his potential, someone that could grow into the league. Now, he hasn't yet grown in sufficiently at all. Whereas Watkins is almost the total opposite of that they're buying him because he's proven Premier League goals. Now, I suppose that is where it just makes ultimate logic for Manchester United, because they struggled for goals last season. Watkins is almost a guarantee. But there is an element for all. I think I've made this point in the show before, but I think it's still so pointed this summer. Ratcliffe in March or so was talking about how Manchester United missed the data revolution, and like they were kind of being beaten to kind of obvious players that weren't necessarily that expensive, but you can be really smart about signing. And yet the two signings they've made so far this window, and one of these players are targeting in Watkins, well, they're the sort of players that, I mean, you don't exactly need advanced recruitment to look at them. You can just turn on Super Sunday.
Yeah, good points. Okay, gents, we'll just leave it there for a minute. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning papers, including this in the Times. Captain Fantastic leads the way as England dominate India at Old Trafford. You're watching Back Pages Tonight, and welcome back to the Guardian sports writer Jonathan Liew and the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney. We're going to go straight to the back page of the Times. Captain Fantastic leads the way. Jonathan, this is Ben Stokes. I remember last time we were on this show together, we were talking about Ben Stokes being under a little bit of pressure for runs. But what he has done this series is bowled incredibly well. He's been England's best bowler and a fifer, first one in 8 years.
Yeah, and the two are connected, I think. I think the great Ben Stokes performances are very often fueled by atonement. Like his incredible 2019 comes off the back of Bristol and the court case and wanting to make up for that. And I think the fact that he hasn't really been contributing with runs, that he's basically not been a part of the setup for quite a few months, doing his rehab while they've been having white ball blocks. That has all gone into this, the tour de force that we've seen with the ball this series. And frankly, there was a stat that this is the most overs he's already bowled in a series, and we're barely halfway through it. I wince, frankly, every time I see him giving his hat and sweater to the umpire and starting another over. 9 over spells, 10 over spells. You think, come on, Ben, we've got an Ashes coming up. We've got, you have a big history of injuries. Play within yourself. Just take it easy a little bit. But the fact is, if he did take it easy, if he did play within himself, he wouldn't be Ben Stokes. That's why he's Ben Stokes, and that's why I'm the guy sitting in a hotel room talking about him.
Yeah, he's been absolutely brilliant, hasn't he? Rishal Pant wincing a little bit as well today. That's a whole different story. But we're going to move on to Serena Vman and the back of the Guardian, Miguel. Vman not for sale at any price. Says Mark Bullingham, back of the Guardian. I mean, she does have this incredible record, Serena. She's going for 3 Euros in a row. You guys are out there in Switzerland. How impressive has she been? Because it hasn't been England's kind of most clinical tournament, but she's still got the job done so far.
Yeah, despite the fact they're on the brink, they're in a final and maybe on the brink of glory. Weirdly, I would say quite mixed. I was there for that press briefing today, sat in front of Mark Bullingham, actually just at the exact same time the Alexander Isak news broke. So that was an interesting one for Back, because some of them actually are the Newcastle correspondents. Bit of panic about that. But the FA absolutely love her, rightly. Her record is incredible. Her impact as a team was incredible. I mean, the very fact she delivered England women's first ever trophy is testament to that. But this competition has been quite a weird one because, England, maybe outside Spain and possibly France, they're the squad with the best individual talent in the tournament. And yet, in pretty much every game, bar the win over the Netherlands, it felt like they've been less than the sum of their parts, which is obviously kind of the opposite of what a manager is supposed to do. I think they've started nearly every game with the wrong approach. And yet, where there's been flaws there, she's corrected it mid-game. These subs she's made, and she's taken some real gambles with her subs, especially as regards to time. And that isn't some accident, because she does that to try and psychologically unsettle the opposition. The later you make the sub, even though they're chasing a game, the more they have to change up, the more panic grows, and it has worked. And it's worked in an overall sense as well, because I think while England have had a lot of luck, much more luck, I think, than 2023, and obviously a very different campaign to 2022, they've also shown resolve. I think it was Jonathan that actually made this point to me the other day, that Serena is actually a bit like Gareth Southgate, in that whatever about the kind of tactical questions, she's built this kind of culture within the team that does manifest itself in moments of where maybe kind of less together sides would go out, one of them being the Sweden game.
Yeah, and she's also got superstar players, of course, who can really impact games and have won games and have won tournaments, which leads me nicely onto your piece, Jonathan, about Chloe Kelly. Kelly, the effortless England icon, steals the show again, the winner, obviously, in the semi-final. You've written a piece on her. Tell us a little bit about it and what's so impressive about this woman.
Yeah, well, the designers have done a good job as well with that. The interesting thing about Kelly is she's a star player, but not to the extent that I guess she's starting in the side, but what she is an icon. We all know about the celebrations, we know about the penalty run up, we know about the shin pad with her wedding picture on it. She has this incredible knack of capturing the attention. I guess the millennials call it main character energy, right? That she steps up. There was a great little vignette where Vman asks Alex Greenwood, it's either you or Chloe to take the penalty, and Greenwood goes up to Chloe and Chloe says I'm doing it. And I think on the pitch that's been really valuable for England, because you have someone who is not fazed by pressure, who actually thrives on it in the big moments, and very often pops up, sometimes off the bench, whether it's in the Euro 2022 final, whether it's against Sweden, and makes a decisive contribution, and is really kind of unashamed about kind of being in the spotlight.
Yeah, and of course she started the season, as you mentioned, the WSL season, out of favour, Miguel, at Manchester City. She had to kind of push pretty hard to get to Arsenal on loan, and then eventually at Arsenal permanently to get minutes. Without those minutes, without that move, she might not have been featuring so prominently in this tournament.
Yeah, maybe those little twists of fate. And of course, one of the ironies being that she hasn't started this tournament either, that she has been used in an impact role. And even though you would have expected actually Vman to maybe given some of the starting lineup issues that England have had, and given the way the Sweden game ended, you would have expected Kelly to start the semi-final against Italy. She didn't, and yet again was the most influential player on the pitch when she came on. I mean, Aguimang as well, of course, got that superb equaliser. But watching that game, it did feel like it was the way Kelly was willing to run at the Italian defence, which kind of changed the momentum of the match. And maybe that's why she's actually better suited coming off the bench, because she can do that. She can surely change the tone. And it's one of the things playing Spain. Spain are most of the few flaws they've got. They're most susceptible to pace and someone running at you directly. And maybe that's where, in a final like this, she could be most effective, actually coming off the bench to change that direction of play again. Which is a strange one for a start.
Yeah, well, good luck to Chloe Kelly and the Lionesses. We're going to move and finish on this story. Jonathan, a sad one. Incredible Hulk, the front of the star, the passing of Hulk Hogan. You're a bit too young to remember Hulk Hogan, I'm not, but a legendary kind of icon of his own sport, who did so much for WWE, WWF.
Yeah, is wrestling a sport? I guess so. It was on Sky Sports, wasn't it? Sports entertainment, you'd call it. Yeah, very very sad for his family. He was obviously very very checkered character with a slightly unsavoury moments in his career, but a lot of people liked him, and so it's sad for those and that.
OK, we are going to leave it there. Thank you very much to the guys. Also on the back of the Times, Ringrose opts out for Lions. That is Gary Ringrose, who's called his own... said he's not fit because of concussion when he was going to play. So that is all of that. Thanks to Jonathan and to Miguel. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Back Pages tonight at hour, and the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us again on Friday evening when our guests will be Mark Ogden from ESPN and Martin Ziegler from The Times.